This is the dark garage track in the style of Vacant I'll be taking you through today. And this project is available to all my mercenary rank and above patrons. Okay, so I think the best place to start is with the music, which consists of 3 pads, 2 in Serum, which are from the Vacant sample library, and 1 in Surge XT, which is a free synth. So this is how they all sound together. And this is just the first one. So with this, I'm pairing an analog wavetable with a digital wavetable. And I tend to like this pairing because I find that the combination yields quite interesting tonalities. And the tonalities are really interesting and important when you start filtering and adding movement, as that is really what creates interest into the sound. So the process here is just literally clicking through until I find 2 that sound quite interesting. And then the next thing I do for a pad is simply assign an attack to a macro control, just for easy adjustment. And I tend to like it somewhere around here, 1.5. And because this is set to a macro, it actually looks like I'm not using any of the controls. So I'm going to mute this and play it, just so we can see the parameters for all the macros, otherwise you won't be able to see them. So yeah, the attack's set around 60%. And then I've also assigned the attack parameter to the wavetable position of A, B, and a very small amount on a high pass filter here, just opening up the cutoff very gradually. This is just a simple modulation setup that just injects a bit of movement into the sound. And that is all I'm doing on this page, other than using this Chaos LFO, which is assigned to the fine-tune controls of A and B, which we can probably better see in the Matrix page down here. I'm only using 2 or 3%. And it's set to bipolar, meaning it can move both ways. So this is just to emulate some kind of analog pitch drift and inject some warmth into the sound, so you can see the sort of circular motion this is following. And this just means that the pitch drift is very gentle and gradual, just trying to push it more in the direction of analog synths. And the rest of the sound is then inside this effects page. You can see I'm using a bandpass filter, which is very important for this Vacant kind of dark garage stuff. It's always very mid-range heavy, with the tops and the lows being filtered away. Saturation just to thicken the sound. We've then got some dimension just to make it sound a little bit wider, a bit bigger. Some reverb, which is on 100%. And then a compressor after the reverb, just to kind of smash the reverb and make it sound like it's part of the sound rather than it just occurring after. And this compression setup also helps bring up the tail of the reverb, makes it sound a little bit thicker. And then the second pad is made very much in the same style as this one. The idea was that they complement one another. The only real difference here is that I'm using this oscillator for some noise, which just helps add a bit of texture into the sound. I'll just show the effects page, which is very similar. Got the compressor and the reverb the other way around, just because it sounded good like this. And the last sound is then from Surge XT, which yes, looks very dated, but the sounds in the presets most definitely are not. This is also one of Lorne's favourite synths, so definitely don't overlook it. It's chock full of presets though, there's tons of stuff in here. So this is how the pad sounds without my processing. kind of like a nice warm Juno pad. And then with my processor, if I can click the right one. So without, and with. So you can hear that I'm basically removing, and you can actually see down here exactly what I'm doing. I'm just removing all the lows, some of the mids, and really accentuating that top end to get kind of the airy wind quality out of the sound. You can see the crazy boosts. And the idea here is that they layer, these three work together. So if I just play them all again, and then I'll mute the third one, and you'll hear exactly what it's adding. That's all of them. So I try to build my pads in layers, with each of them kind of performing a different role and adding something new to the sound. And then I'll just quickly cover the chords, which are a complete rip-off of Vacant's Night Drive, I believe. Now, normally this sort of music follows like a major-minor pattern because it has that kind of nostalgic, wistful, longing quality to it. So normally you'll probably see something like a minor progression, which then ends on a major. And that's what provides the kind of longing, nostalgic feel. I also like to not write these in blocks. So we've got two kind of blocky chords here. But this one obviously extends out past the other two. So it's twice as long as the first two. And that's just to help avoid that kind of blocky texture that you can get when you're writing chords in this way. One thing you might want to do actually is write a chord progression like this and then put it into a piece of software like Pause Stretch, which basically allows you to slow it down, I think up to 1,000 times. And that just means that you can create these nice ambient beds, which you can then build around. But I did notice with Vacant, he tends to use more chordal ambience. So there's kind of two paths in this kind of music. Like one is like the granular ambient bed style, which someone like Burial is notorious for. And then one is like more chords and stuff that's very much got a tonal center and follows a kind of distinct chordal pattern. And that's what I found Vacant was doing a lot, so that's why I decided to do this. The last thing to cover is then the processing on here. There is a couple of groups actually of plugins that I just want to quickly cover because you'll see them repeated throughout this project. So the first one is my analog console emulation, which basically just seek to add analog warmth, which is basically just harmonic distortion, right? These are my two favorite plugins for that. So you'll see these on every channel, just how to make it sound less digital. You'll see me using these EQs a lot, and these are kind of my surgical EQs, whereas Ableton stock is then my kind of EQ for broad adjustments, so low pass, high pass, band pass, etc. I'll then use Ableton's glue compressor, purely for dynamic control, so just to keep everything at the same level. And that is it, and then I'll just cover the plugins as they appear on the channels. So I'll now just A/B these so you can hear exactly what they're doing. So we'll start without. Very muddy, a lot of low resonances. And then with. Nice and airy and light. So with this kind of music, because it is very mid-range dominant, you'll find that, or I found at least when I was mixing it, that there's a lot of low frequency kind of mid-range build-up in this kind of area between 100 and 1K. So I'm going to be having, you'll see a lot of EQs in this project that's just scooping that out and trying to control it. And Soothe is basically just a dynamic version of it that's doing the exact same thing. The only other two plugins on here are just the stereo widening tools. Kind of self-explanatory what they're doing, but I'll just quickly A/B them. So the idea here is they're just basically pushing the sound out a little bit, which is also having the effect of pushing it back in the mix, which is exactly what I wanted. And that's the music group. Really not a lot going on, but I think it encapsulates Vacant sound quite well. Next then is the drums, which I always have a lot of fun doing. So this is how they sound all together. Going to close these other groups so we can focus on them. So Vacant's drums kind of oscillate between two different styles. One of the styles is kind of quite aggressive and forward, especially for this sort of music. The other style is more kind of laid back and organic, a bit like what you would hear in Burial's music, for example. So with these, I try to kind of toe the line between each to try and give you a good example of like an aggressive kick and snare, but then maybe a more organic kind of percussion and Foley groove so you can see how both of them might work. So I'll go through each of the sounds separately. This is the kick drum, which is simply just a kick drum I have made in Serum, and it's in the Vacant sample library. Literally just a single oscillator, which then has a high-pitched transient, just for a bit of click. I'm then using a clipper for some hard clipping, just to thicken the sound and shave off some of the transient. That's with it, without, with, so you can hear the difference. And that's literally all I'm doing for the kick. The snare is then a combination of a rim shot and a Foley sample of me striking a tree with a wooden branch, quite a big one. And actually it's quite a nice way of getting kind of woody snare hits, but it's even better when the branch starts to break off and you get all these kind of nice textures as you strike the tree. Get another sample from the library, and I don't think there's anything else on this other than another standard clip, just for some clipping. That's with it. Out. Nothing too crazy going on there. The percussion is probably where it gets a little bit more interesting. So here's how the percussion sounds. So the percussion's made up from some hi-hats from the library, perk loop, a chopped up perk loop, and then a second chopped up perk loop, and then an instance of life. Now this plugin is quite cool. I know not everybody has it, but the thing I like about it is it comes with a mobile app. So you install the app on your phone, and then the idea is you sample, Foley and field recorders and such when you're out and about. Then you come back and load them into this plugin, and you can kind of create like interesting percussion grooves from sounds that you wouldn't have thought would actually work as percussion. So I really like this plugin. I know not everyone has it, but I think it is really good for coming up with interesting grooves. And the idea here was, because I've got three sounds that are very choppy, they don't quite blend very well, I think. So life then sits over the top and kind of mashes everything together nice. Makes it feel like it's a single unified groove. There is some individual processing, just some EQs, and a bit of auto panning. I think with percussion, I'm really quite hyper focused on spreading it out and making it sound quite large. So that's what they're there for. And then the group processing on the group bus of the percussion. Simply a low cut, which is kind of standard, and then some clipping. Now you can see that the clipping is shaving quite a lot of the transients off, and that is by design. The reason for that is because there's obviously, they take up a lot of peak room, the transients on the percussion, and they're really not necessary at all. So when you stick a clipper on these and you drop the clipping amount, so you're getting quite a lot. Because of how quick and obviously short the transients are, you don't actually notice the peak level reduction, but the meters do. So maybe you're saving like 10 dB of peak headroom, but you can't actually hear any difference. So you can then range the average loudness after saving all that peak headroom. So for example, if we look at the sound coming in, we see that down here. Look at the difference. The peak's all the way up here, almost touching zero, but then it's coming out down here. It actually sounds better after clipping because it's got a bit louder. The average loudness has got a bit louder, but the peak has been greatly reduced. This to me is a much better version of compression, especially for shaving off transients. It really helps when you do this at every level of the mix, because then when you get to the master, you can raise the track nice and loud without really having to do anything on the master limiter, which you'll see when we get there. So the final group of the drums is this Foley collection. And I should note that that wood block pairs with the snare. That's just the snare by itself. Just makes it sound a bit more woody and organic. And the wood hit has also got a bit of noise or texture before it. So it kind of like adds like a suction effect to the snare. Now, if you've got a plugin like Snapback, which I have down here, you can actually use that for the same purpose. And that adds kind of like, or you can use it to add texture before and after the sound. So you can add like a bit of vinyl crackle. And that kind of is obviously very important for this sort of music because it's supposed to kind of be dirty, organic and full of texture. We've then got these metal hits, which I believe are like someone hitting pots and pans with drumsticks. And then if I combine the percussion with the Foley, just adds a lot of organic texture to it. Isn't really anything else going on there. I've also got this match strike, which acts as like a riser into the next section. Just again, adding some interesting kind of tonalities. And then the group processing on the Foley, I believe, is exactly the same as the percussion, aside from one of the compactors, which actually I'll just quickly cover these. So anytime you see these in a project, these are just my sidechain to my kick and my snare. So you'll see these on pretty much every channel. And all that's doing is just reducing the level of whatever channel they're on to allow the snare and the kick clean passage in the mix. Now I've got this on both the kick and the snare just because I found that the snare was getting a bit washed out. So I wanted to make sure everything was ducking out of the way and allowing it clean passage. I have got a video, my last video actually was on compactor going through it. And I think it is the best plugin for sidechaining. And it's also free. So it's a win-win. And then the processing on the drums looks like this. So we've got the two saturation plugins, some clipping, some glue compression. Not doing too much here, just a little bit of clipping, just to shave off some more of the transients, just before the glue compressor, which then means the compressor has a bit more of a consistent level to work with. And you can see the compressor isn't doing much, maybe 5 dB. One thing I would like to know actually, you'll notice that this is only responding to the kick and the snare because they're obviously a lot louder. That is why having another one on the percussion bus is crucial, because otherwise the percussion isn't being compressed. So always take a note of what your group compressors are actually responding to, because often the kick and snares will be that much louder than everything else. I've then got a low cut because low end eats up the most amplitude. So I just want to make sure that there's nothing, any kind of rumbling frequencies on the kick drum. So that's just there to remove that. And then this one was just a Black Friday pickup that I've been playing with. I'm simply just boosting 3 dB at 200 Hertz, just to add a bit of emphasis, I think, to the kick drum. So here's an AB. So you might have noticed that the idea with this chain is kind of to squeeze and glue everything together so it's nice and compact, which also has the added benefit because we can then raise the average loudness more of kind of pushing it forward in the mix. So you'll notice how when this chain is bypassed, everything sounds kind of backward a bit. And then when I engage the chain, everything comes forward right to the front of the mix and sounds very aggressive. So I'll just do it again and just listen out for those things. Perfect. As I mentioned, Vacant's drums can be quite aggressive, so I tried to capture that with the kick and the snare, and then the Foley and the percussion, kind of just demonstrating some more of the organic stuff, just so you get a mix of both in this video. It is also worth mentioning that the kick drum and the snare drum are slightly off the grid, So that is kind of standard for this sort of music. The kicks are all slightly late. And the snares are also slightly late. And that is just to make it feel laid back. Very, very slightly. And then the percussion is very much off the grid. That is just completely random. My kind of principle here is I want the kicks slightly off, but not too far off, because they're going to be sidechained to all the other sounds. And if they're completely off the grid, it can just sound a bit strange. The snares are then further, a little bit more off the grid, a little bit further later behind the beat. And then the percussion is just completely behind the beat. And that kind of combination of like tiers, 1, 2, 3, seems to work quite well. Because if the kicks are completely off the beat, just all over the place, it just becomes too chaotic, I find. So I like to layer it, with the kicks being a little bit off the grid, but not that too far. Snares being a little bit further off the grid, and then the percussion just being anyhow. That seems to yield the best results. Okay, then the bass is again another preset from the sample library, the Vacant sample library. Down here. I'm just going to keep these closed so we can progress it in order. Again, making this on Serum, my favorite synth. This is how it sounds. So this is very much like a D&B Reese. We've got two wavetables. These are the Access Virus wavetables, which are free. You can find them on the internet. I'll leave a link in the description. Obviously, the Access Virus is kind of a classic D&B synth, maybe bass music synth, really. This was kind of, before the times of Serum, very long time ago. A lot of people used to use this synth just because it has lots of kind of interesting harmonics with the wavetables or the oscillators. And it's really cool that someone's made this so we can now access them in Serum. So yeah, this is just the same wavetable in both. And the second one basically has the fine-tune increase, which is kind of like the classic way of making a kind of beating D&B Reese. Got the unison turned up just for a bit stereo width. Nothing going on with the envelope, and I think I'm using LFO 4 just to open up the filter slightly. And check out this fizz control here. So the idea with this is controlling the level of the second oscillator, which isn't going to the same filter as the first. So it's going to this one, which does have a high cut, but it's not quite as drastic as this one. So the idea here is that I play the track and listen to it, and I increase this fizz, which is kind of increasing the top end. And it's also quite wide as well, so you're getting this nice top end width on the sample. And it's dialed in to the track, so it fits in with the track. So when it starts to sound like it's too much, I just back it off. And that just allows me to really tweak it alongside the track. I'm also FMing from B, which just means we're using oscillator B to modulate this one. And this is also, again, a classic kind of D&B trick. I believe it's not actually frequency modulation though, isn't it? It's phase or something. Even though there is still a phase distortion. It's not true FM, but I'll save that for perhaps another video. So yeah, there are more macros on it. Just for some further control. And then the rest of this sound is made in the effects page, so obviously distortion is a must. Little low boost here. Flanger and a hyper just for some width. A reverb which is disabled but can sound nice. And that's it. So a very simple sound. There's a lot more of these in the sample library as well, but I had a lot of fun making the Reeses. But the part of the Reese that's actually probably the coolest is the automation. So, well, it looks like these have been disabled actually because I've just been playing with them. So we have two lots of automation on here. The first is simply just a cutoff. So you can see how it's increasing at the end of the notes. Oh no. That's the pitch bend. This one's the cutoff. You hear the filter opening up at the end of the note. It opens up a little bit more here. This just provides a little bit of dynamic movement and just makes it sound a little bit more interesting. And the second one is then just I tried to basically pitch bend the notes into one another, but it didn't really work. So these first two end up going too high, I think. Yeah. So you can hear how they flick up and then they instantly go back down because the note's lower than I've bent them up. So I need to adjust them. But this one's cool. This one basically bends the last note back into the first. Which I think I did get right. But yeah, the other two don't really work very well. So then the group processing on the bass looks like this. An EQ just, I guess, carving away some of the tops. A clipper that's actually doing quite a lot. So the idea here is the clipper and the compressor work kind of as a unit to keep the bass controlled and at the same level. Because the bass really is the foundation of the track, and it's really important that it stays at the same level and isn't jumping around all over the place. So that's what they're doing. We've then got the two plugins I mentioned earlier, and then Compactor again, which is sidechaining the kick to the bass, which I'll actually just show because it's quite important for getting the balance right of these two sounds. You can see that it's sidechained for pretty much the whole of the kick. Cool. Okay, so the vocals I actually had a lot of fun with in this track. I basically just sampled a bunch of different artists I liked and thought would fit well with this kind of Vacant style project. There's quite a lot going on here, so I'll just skip through them all so you can hear what they're all doing. This is kind of a manual delay that fades out, but not all the way. And then it comes back in and it culminates on this word here, voice. The vocals in Vacant's music really provide like an organic quality to it. And he often combines a kind of male register vocal with something in the female range, and they sort of play off one another. So I've tried to do something similar. So this is kind of like a vocal that I'm using as a riser, which is kind of like the female vocal. And then I've got another one from the same acapella. Pitched down, 7 semitones. This one is a lot quieter, but the idea is they kind of play off one another. And then we've got a breath vocal sample, which kind of plays before some of the vocals just to make it sound like the vocalist is taking a breath. And then the main vocal is this one,
Let me hear your voice.
which I then created a manual delay of,
Let me hear your voice.
which fades out, increases the reverb, and then it comes back in and culminates on the word voice, which yeah, I just thought was cool and fit the track well. The last vocal was in this one, the long one that plays in the second half of the drop. I left all the names in, so you can look all these artists up if you don't know them. And then the last one, because I used stem splitting, this was before it was built into Ableton, so now it's even easier. These are basically little effects that came with the acapellas. So the algorithm just kind of messed up and thought that this was vocal. which I just thought was a happy accident and ended up leaving him. If I just quickly look at the individual channels, you'll see that they've all basically got bandpass filters on them, which are very important for this sort of sound. I mean, for example, if I play this main vocal in the context of the project and disable this, obviously it just sounds like way too piercing and sharp. And the other thing with the bandpass filter is it kind of makes it sound distant, like it's coming from very far away, so it kind of naturally pushes it back in the mix. And I have emphasized that. So that's just some resonant control getting rid of a lot of the mids. I have emphasized this with early reflections, which basically trick the ear into perceiving the sound as further away. Well, it depends how many you add. But I'm essentially pushing this back in the mix so it sounds a little bit more distant. It kind of makes the vocals sound like they're an angel, like it gives them an angelic quality. Like they're playing from above almost, or they're kind of playing from everywhere. So I'll just quickly A-B it. So this is without it.
Let me hear your voice.
I'll just play that again.
Let me hear your voice.
And then with it.
Let me hear your voice. Let me hear your voice.
So it sort of makes it sound bigger but further away at the same time, which for these vocals I felt was perfect. And that is just down here. You can also do this with Valhalla Room, any plugin that allows you to adjust the early reflections independently from the rest of the reverb will work. And that's it, and then the rest of it is just the glue compression just for some control.
Let me hear your voice.
Which actually isn't doing that much. Maybe it's set up to work. No, so it's literally not doing much at all. And that's the vocals. The next thing is then the effects, which I maybe went a little bit overboard with because I decided to have a go at synthesizing my own. So this is how they sound. We've got wind, rain, and some vinyl and tape noise. And yeah, I decided to make all these in Serum just because I thought it'd be fun. And essentially, like wind and rain, they're basically just like pink noise filtered with lots of different EQs performing different tasks. And all of these EQs are set up to be connected to these sample and hold oscillators, which are basically, when you crank the smooth up, they make some like kind of like long sweeping sine waves. So they're kind of perfect for nature sounds that follow this sort of modulation pattern. But yeah, there's obviously no reason to make your own other than it just being fun. I've got a bunch of videos on my Patreon showing you how to make these, but I just thought it was a lot of fun to have a go. It's also just a lot more interesting than showing like the standard, you know, field recordings that I'm just going to download from some website. I thought it'd be more interesting to make them. And you can also tweak them and get them to fit in the project a bit better, but yeah, I thought it was good fun. And then just simply some vinyl and tape crackle, which is just again using the inbuilt sounds of Serum. All of these are inside the sample library. They've all got some kind of low pass filter on them just so it sits them back a little bit in the mix. And then the group processing is quite, I mean, it looks quite extensive, but it's kind of not. So these are just two EQs to get rid of a bunch of, looks like low end and then a bit of mud. So yeah, just some of that low end rumble. Glue compressor just to control everything. It's doing quite a lot, but obviously worked. Sidechain to the kick and the snare just to ensure that they're not masking it because they are obviously just essentially pure white noise. And then a bit of stereo spreading just to spread it out across the spectrum. But I want to just cover this in a bit more detail for a second because with this guy, you can actually see how it's spreading the sound. So if I just disable it and then enable it, so it might sound worse with it, and that's kind of by design. So if I drag this all the way down, it's kind of in mono now. And you can see the space that it's occupying in the kind of sound field. And if I start to increase this, it now occupies essentially the whole of the sound field. We're going more. It now kind of occupies what would be sort of the middle of the sound field, but kind of the back on headphones. And it's very centralized around this area. Now, this is by design because I don't want this to occupy the whole of the sound field because it is just pure white noise and it kind of get in the way of the other sounds. So the idea here was I'm using this, yes, to spread it, but also kind of to push it into a frequency pocket to keep it nice and contained. So again, that's how it sounds and looks across the whole sound field. And then pushed back. It's a lot more condensed and it shoves it kind of to the back. And then the effect channels, which are actually quite important for this style of music. I'm using 3 different effect channels, all of which are coming from Valhalla Supermassive, which is free. So it's well worth your time to check this out. I've got a long reverb, a short reverb, and a delay. So this is the long reverb. Yes, I am sidechaining my reverb. Also rolling off some of the lows and highs. I'm sidechaining it because it is a long reverb. The tail is going to be sitting across the kick and the snare. Well, mainly the snare really in this case. And I don't want anything across the snare because I want the snare to be nice and sharp and clean. So that's my reason for sidechaining them with the compactors here. Not using Soothe, so we'll get rid of that. And I'm increasing it very slightly, I believe. Yes, 3 dB. So I'm making the reverb 3 dB louder. So if I play this actually, and increase the level. I think with this kind of music, playing with the level of the reverb actually has quite large effects on the mix. So it's something I'd always recommend to do. And then the short reverb is just for the drums. Reason being, drums are obviously very short and splashy, and they're triggering the reverb a lot. So if these were sent to the long reverb, there would just be way too much tails happening. And I really want to make sure that the build-up of reverb is as minimal as possible. Again with the low cut. And again with a bit of an increase in volume. And then the final effect channel is a delay with the same plugin. Quarter note delay, which I think is only happening on the vocals. Again with a low cut. And this one I'm increasing quite a lot. 13 dB. That's just because I always find delays to be too quiet in the mix. I often also automate the level being sent to them. So you'll notice some of these have got this one, for example. I'm basically increasing the level to counteract the fading out of the delay. And that's just because in the context of the mix, the sample plays and then it just disappears. And I want the tail, the delay's tail to actually be heard. I want a couple of the repetitions to be heard and it to fade into silence. I don't want it to basically play and then just completely disappear. So the volume adjustments are just made to ensure that when you're listening to the mix in its entirety, you can actually hear the delay fading out. And that's the effect channels. And then mastering, which I actually don't do as much of as I once used to because I try and get the mix basically almost mastered in and of itself. I think a lot of the loudness is really achieved in the mix, especially with controlling the transients with the clippers and then also controlling the kind of loudness of everything with the compressors, really keeping it in place. That goes a long way. So when I actually do have to master a track, I don't have to do too much to it to get it sitting at a nice loud level. So the two analog saturation plugins, which are literally on every single channel. We've then got some clipping, which is very minimal. I'm then using this to remove some mud, so I'll just exaggerate it. I'm removing all this by turning it down. You hear how that makes everything sound a lot more tighter. I then have two saturation plugins, Max of which is an absolute hidden gem for essentially for increasing average loudness. I've got a video on this, but it's basically like a soft clipper. It's actually very similar to Sonox Inflator. It's basically a better version of Sonox Inflator with a much newer algorithm. And essentially what this will allow you to do is just raise the average loudness of your track by like I would say up to about 5 dB. So it's a really easy way of increasing the average level of your mix without making it sound worse. But it's basically just using soft clipping. So it's adding in harmonic saturation, which essentially thickens out the track and just makes it sound that much louder. So if I crank this up and I then A/B it, you'll hear the difference in loudness. So without it, and with it. Without, with. And it costs like $20, I think, so extremely affordable and very, very good. The next two are then just some mastering compressors, which just basically help to smooth out the signal level before it hits the limiter. These guys are quite slow and they're only doing sort of 1 or 2 dB, so like a gentle kind of massage over the whole track. And then the final plugin is just my limiter of choice, which I'm really not doing anything with, like it's 1 dB at most. And I'm actually hitting around 7.5 RUFS. So again, like I said earlier, because I'm managing the level at all the different stages throughout the track, I'm really not having to do much at all with the limiter to achieve a decent level. So hitting around 7.5. Around 3 dB gets me to about 5.6. But I'm happy keeping it around, only doing around 1 dB because I don't need it to be that loud. And I'll now just bypass the whole of the chain. I'll actually stick these within it because they have more of an effect on the master. So we'll start without, with, without, and with. So the idea is just saturation to thicken out the track and add some harmonic distortion. We've then got some EQ just to remove anything we don't like, usually just a bit of mud around 500, 600 hertz. And then we're basically just using some compressors just to control everything and just like as a gentle massage over the track. And then obviously a final limiter. So nothing too crazy, just very basic stuff, but it just helps kind of uplift the track and make it sound that much better. All right, and that's the entire project. It was a lot of fun to make, and I hope it demonstrated and captured Vacant sound well. Thank you for watching and your continued support. And please do check out my Patreon if you'd like to see more of these kinds of videos. Until next time.